Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everyone participating around the world. It is a great honor to be presenting at the International Strategic Asset Management Forum in Belgrade, Serbia. My name is Daniel Platz. I'm a Senior Economic Affairs Officer and I lead a work stream on infrastructure asset management at the UN. That is what I will be talking about, and I'll place some emphasis on the climate resilient asset management sub-work stream that is part of this project. My presentation will have three parts. First, I'll give you an overview of our initiative. Second, I will talk about a simple approach and decision-making framework that could be used by local governments around the world to promote more climate resilient infrastructure asset management. And finally, I'll talk about a few next steps. This, in a nutshell, is the capacity development strategy of the UN on infrastructure asset management. We start out with toolkits and policy guidance material that is continuously growing and it's continuously being updated. Based on that, we go into our beneficiary countries at the local level with a quite detailed and field-tested diagnostic tool to see what the asset management needs are. Based on that, we usually do a series of customized workshops with local governments that present a diverse constituency within the country. We usually focus on secondary cities, but we also include districts, provinces, and other local governments with different asset management responsibilities. Then we ask them to design and implement an AMAP, an Asset Management Action Plan. That AMAP ideally is evidence-based, risk-informed, and resilient, and a multi-year framework for action. We also organize training of trainers that is based on the lessons learned of the AMAP implementation on the ground. Those trainings are usually done in conjunction with the Ministry of Local Government and with local training institutes. Finally, we focus on the enabling environment. We interact with governments at the national level and see what they can do to put in place an enabling environment for local government and their ability to do systematized, proactive and holistic comprehensive asset management. All of these lessons then feed back into the toolkits and policy guidance. Our main resource is the Infrastructure Asset Management Handbook, entitled Managing Infrastructure Assets for Sustainable Development, a handbook for local and national governments. That handbook will be available very soon in all languages. It is already available in English, French, Spanish, and Swahili. It is currently being translated into Serbian. It includes a variety of tools, including the diagnostic tool that I mentioned earlier as part of the strategy, and a template to do multi-year asset management action plans. It also has a chapter on data, a chapter on climate risk assessments, it suggests ways to update AMAPs and make them more emergency resilient and to increase the emergency preparedness of asset management action plans. And then finally, it also has a guide on how local and central government can work together to come up with an enabling environment. We have field tested many of these tools in a variety of countries, including in Uganda, Tanzania, Nepal, and Bangladesh, very vulnerable countries, least developed countries with very big challenges at the local level, some of which you may be able to relate to, but some of which are probably have been overcome in the region of Southeast Europe. We, during COVID, then had to switch sort of to an online format. We delivered very extensive training workshops. Some of you participated for different regions and had over 2,500 local government and central government officials participating in these trainings. Now let me move over to that one chapter in the handbook that focuses on climate change. And some of the slides are very basic here, but they will give you a flair, an idea of what we're trying to do and how we present the issue. These slides, pictures, the visualization of the framework is taken directly out of the handbook, and your feedback on whether that presentation is useful or could be improved is very important to us. What is climate change? Of course, we introduced climate change in the handbook. It refers to the change in the global climate that results from increasing average global temperatures over multiple decades. And everyone can relate to climate change, whether it is storm surges, wildfires, or droughts. Now, what are the climate change hazards that are faced by local governments, and what are those impacts on infrastructure? So there are different impacts at different levels. You can lose an entire asset, you can have equipment fail, you can have temporary loss of service, you can have degraded service. And hazards lead to different impacts depending on the assets. And you see here a range of climate change hazards that we go into some detail in the handbook. But why is climate resilient asset management important? Well, we all know that assets will be able to provide more reliable services. They'll have a longer lifespan, lower life cycle costs, very important, may be much more attractive to investors, especially in instances where private investors can be brought in to asset management. And there are many other co-benefits. We also talk about natural infrastructure, the types of natural infrastructure and what they can do. There are naturally existing assets like wetlands, forests, and parks. There are enhanced assets like urban parks, stormwater ponds, rain gardens, and there are nature simulating assets like permeable pavement, green roofs, rain barrels. Some of them, of course, are quite advanced. Now, what is the process that we offer to local governments in the handbook? It is really a quite simple but very logically stringent assessment process of your risk and the impact it may have on your local government and whether you should take action or not. At the very outset, you ask the question, which climate hazards are likely to affect your community? And we provide some concrete tools to make that assessment, including access to the relevant data on climate change in your region. Then we talk about how that hazard would affect your community. And third, which climate impacts could cause significant disruptions. Fourth, we move to the more strategic evaluation part and ask which climate impacts are likely to have the most severe consequences. And lastly, we ask local governments to consider the big picture. Given your community's goals, which climate risks warrant response efforts now? How do you respond to climate risk once you've walked through that decision-making process and you decide to take action? There are non-capital interventions, policies, regulations, or changes to operations and maintenance practices. Those are incredibly important, and those are the ones that can be done if there is political will rather quickly, because they are not as capital intensive. There are new and retrofitted assets, new asset installations or modifications of existing assets will be necessary aspects of risk mitigation strategies. There are strategies to implement low carbon resilience, developing integrated strategies that reduce both greenhouse gases emissions and vulnerabilities to climate change impacts. And then there's the idea that we're all very familiar with now of building back better. Reconstruction, rehabilitation, and renewal can, to a considerable degree, be planned ahead of disaster events, provided you understand what may occur. So here is the process of building a climate resilient asset management action plan. First, you identify the specific action items to address priority climate risk following that decision-making process that I just talked about. Second, you identify the gaps between today's reality and your risk management objective. Third, you identify the time frame to implement the action. Then you delineate specific staff roles for implementation within your team. You look at the resources as well, identify the people, training, or technology or assets your team requires to complete the action. And finally, what is the funding source? Very critical. Are the costs upfront, recurring, or both? Very important to make a very clear evidence-based assessment here. There's a strong, we all know that, economic case for climate adaptation. in addition to the social case and the climate justice aspect. According to the Global Commission on Adaptation, making infrastructure climate resilient yields an average return on investment of 4-to-1 in avoided damages. Climate resilient asset management also enables disaster risk reduction, sometimes to the tune of every dollar spent generating almost $250 in avoided damages. Let me now go to the last part of my presentation, next steps. What is the UN doing to promote asset management action plans around the world? Well, we're in the midst of creating a little bit of a movement on asset management action plans around the world based on the work we've done in the field as well as the work we've done through our online solutions dialogues. On our website, and you will see the address later on, we have a tool that is sort of a storyboard showing you where asset management action plans are currently implemented as a direct result of the UN initiative. We have over 150 local governments around the world working on this right now. Over 562 officials from local national governments worked on this, with the support sometimes also from multilateral organizations. And the idea is really to share the AMAPs and the lessons learned from their implementation globally. You can go to this storyboard on our website, click on the local government, and retrieve the asset management action plans, which are very detailed multi-year plans to take actions on one priority asset. This is important in order to get started. What we really try to do is make sure that governments, local governments, don't focus on all their assets. Identify the priority asset where critical action is the most pertinent next step, and then focus on that. Assets may range from roads to water and sanitation treatment plants, to waste management facilities, to ports, to hospitals, to schools. Any asset that is crucial for public service can be chosen. So I urge you to take a look at this and see if you want to add your own AMAP to the region of Southeast Europe. You can see that right now it is quite blank still there. Well, we do have AMAPs in Africa, Latin America, and in some countries in Asia and the Pacific. I also wanted to mention a massive open online course that we have done building on the handbook. It is self-paced. It's an, so to say, offline alternative. You don't need to be live online. Of course, you need to be having access to the internet, but you can do it at your own pace, and it results in some certification process. It is quite detailed. It's about 12 hours of detailed training that could be very interesting, perhaps for some of your colleagues that are new to the asset management world, and gives a very basic but a very logically consistent introduction into the issue of asset management. I also wanted to highlight the UN workshop on infrastructure asset management in Southeast Europe that is being done in collaboration with NALIS, with GIZ, with UNCDF, and with UNOPS from 14 to 17 December. Finally, I mentioned our plan to scale up country-level support. So the next countries we will be actively working in are Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, the Gambia, Bangladesh, Nepal, Laos, PDR, Peru, and Costa Rica. And of course, we also work in the Southeast European region now with NALIS, starting with the next workshop in December, our first workshop in the region. Please go check out our infrastructure asset management homepage. There are ample resources on that. Let us know what you think about it. Let us know how we can improve. If there's a request for technical assistance, you can also submit those on the website. I hope this was a useful presentation. I am aware that there's no interactive session right now because this is recorded, and I'll probably be sleeping by the time you're discussing this, as it is 3 a.m. Where I am. But I want to encourage some sort of dialogue, and in order to do this, I'm going to move over to the next slide here. please take a look at our contact information. Of course, the presentation is available. You can email me directly. My name is Daniel Platz. The email address you see there is platz@un.org. We also have a more generic email address. Either way, I'll be receiving it. Please let us know what you think. Please let us know how we can help, how we can engage in the region. And I wanted to conclude with a very, very important quote by our United Nations Secretary General that he just released as part of his Common Agenda, recognizing the role of local governments and the importance of building skills at the local level, building resources at the local level, material, financial, personnel, incredibly important. He says, failing to deliver what people need most, including basic services, drives mistrust, regardless of how open institutions are to public participation. I urge investment in public systems and ensuring quality public servants as the main point of contact between the state and the people. I don't think it could be put more clearly that local governments are such a critical intermediary between the nation state and the community, and are at the forefront of delivering the SDG agenda. And to make them a bit more ready, equipped, and to help them and support them is the goal of this initiative on infrastructure asset management. And again, I urge you all to come be part of this, contact me, and start a dialogue. Thank you very much.